Here. Okay, so I am here and you are there. And let us begin then with questions and comments from the assembled mob. What does the riotous group have on their collective brain cells today? Anything at all? Questions, comments, considerations, disasters, catastrophes? Yes, sir.
It says here the king of Egypt died.
Yes.
Is the king of Egypt same as Pharaoh?
Yeah. Okay. Make a note. If I didn't put, I should have put it in the notes if I didn't. Make a note. The word Pharaoh means house. Means house. Okay. So the house of Pharaoh is the house of house, and king and is simply the word Melech, which is the same thing as King David, or King Ahab, or just means a ruler. It comes from the root that talks about the head, the authority, and stuff like that. So yeah, Pharaoh's house is because the Egyptians were very much into dynasties, or dynasties as we pronounce it sometimes over here, so it was a particular family, a particular house. That's why they had also a lot of inbreeding, and therefore that's why King Tut was kind of screwy, and some other of the pharaohs were a little bit weird and had all kinds of stuff. Kind of like the Habsburgs and the Hohenstaufers. Those two families, along, of course, with the family of the Windsors, or the Brandenburgs. Also, Brandenburgs, their family had, hello, good morning. What are you? Oh, that's right. That's exactly what it is. Okay, good. Thank you. They had hemophilia was in their family, and the Hohensteins and Hohenstaufers. They had two things bad going with them. They had anencephalus, which was like not having water on the brain, okay, hydrocephalic. And then they had a real big pronounced chin, jaw. Their jaw was oversized to their head. I don't remember the medical name for that. But there's a picture of Charles, I believe, the Seventh of Spain. And he's got this weird bulbous head, sunken eyes, and a jaw that sticks way out. And he was a bad. He was a mess. He was a real big mess. And one thing, they called him Charles the Drooler, whatever that is in Spanish, because he drooled all the time. Yeah, he was a mess. So yeah, inbreeding is because of being in-house, and that's what Pharaoh means. In-house means the top house, the big house, but not the prison, but Anything else? Question?
Does it mean a person?
It does.
Because they talk about him as a person.
Yeah, it does, but it comes from the idea this is the ruler of the ruling house. Okay, the boss of the boss house. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Looking over again the Ten Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about the one about keeping the Sabbath holy.
Uh-huh.
And, I thought about it some more. I went, I used to go home from church and mow the yard and do this other work. Are we not supposed to be more sitting back and relaxing and not doing anything on the Sabbath?
Yes and no. The point is rest. Now, what's rest for one person may not be rest for another person. Okay. One of our members, for example, I met with yesterday, and she said that her idea of rest is going out and pulling weeds in the yard, because she loves that when she rips up those, because she likes to get them by the roots, and when you get them by the roots and you pull them up, you get this, especially when it's kind of moist, wet, you get this real earthy smell, and you're on your hands and knees and you're really down in the she says, oh, I find that just invigorating. I find that just, relaxing as can be. Okay. She has a very difficult job during the week. It's very stressful during the week. And so on the weekend, she likes to get down on her hands and knees and just, get after the weeds. And
That's the way
so,
my father was, and he'd pull up and he'd say, "Gra, gra, gra."
yeah, the idea is rest. The word Sabbath or Sabbath means rest. It doesn't mean,
No labor.
and that's of course rest. The idea was if God rested, so should you. And God doesn't need to rest.
No, he said he rested on the Sabbath.
Right. And so if God did something he didn't need to do, just to do it, then we can do something that we don't maybe need to do just to do it. Okay, right. And if that's relaxation to you, that's fine. I come over here on Sunday afternoons and I do work. Okay? But to me, it's never work. I don't work. Ever. I haven't worked in 40 years. That even, I didn't think of that as work either. That was very pleasant. I enjoyed that almost sometimes more than my pastoral duties. I'm a frustrated teacher, as you can guess. I just really enjoy having people have to shut up while I talk. That just really makes my day, So, yes, sir.
I was getting on Saturday because I buy stuff at Safeway to take to our Messianic.
Yeah.
I bought something on Saturday because that makes the store employ people.
They're
not used.
Yeah.
Plus, I love shopping.
Right, shop. Yeah. Those guys are little junior Pharisees, and they can't, for some reason they can't get that. I don't know why, but they don't. Anyway, we're not. If your work is debilitating, and some work is, you can't help it. Okay, if you have a job that God has not blessed you with enjoying, okay? If you have a job that is tough, and by tough I don't mean hard. I mean hard to take, mentally, and can be physically too, but especially mentally and emotionally, because the idea of peace in Sabbath is spiritual, and therefore mental, emotional, etc. Okay, so if you have a job, and if God has seen fit to put you in a place that is really hard to take, your boss is a jerk, or the job has turned out to be not something that you thought it was going to be, or for whatever reason, and if you do that, if you wind up doing that on a Sunday, that's kind of defeating the whole purpose of peace. That really is, and not that Sunday is better than any other day. If you wanted to work on Sunday and take Tuesday off, that's your business. Okay. If you want to take a Sunday off and decide, or work on Sunday and decide to take Friday off, that's your business. That's fine. It needs to be a spiritual, mental, emotional rest. That's what it needs to be. That's the idea. And of course, part of that rest is to concentrate on the rest and peace that God gives you in Christ. And of course, the best way to do that, not the only way, but the best way to do that is to worship God in church, study His Word in Bible study. Can you do those things on Tuesday or Friday or whatever? Sure, you can. Is that the best? No, it's not. If, however, you are forced, if you're in the military, say, or you're in some kind of job that's the business is working 7 days a week, maybe even 24 hours a day, and your shift comes around to being Sundays, from 6 in the morning till noon or whatever, all right, then you can take your Sabbath another way. You can come to Tuesday Bible class, you can come to basics, you can, do something else, come by and chat with me, ask me questions. I'm here every morning pretty much, 7 days a week, 365 days a year if I'm not in San Diego. And so, that's a way to do it. So we make a big mistake and we cut ourselves short when we take the Ten Commandments in a legalistic way. Not only do we not keep them properly, but they don't benefit us as God intended for them to benefit us. So, yes?
Is the word commandment actually saying you have to do this, or is it?
Oh yeah, sure it is. They're not suggestions. No, they're not suggestions. They are commandments. This is God's will. God's will for all people of all time, what I call the holy, immutable, that is unchangeable, will of God for all people, all times, and all places. So all around the world, whether they've heard of, whether they have a Bible or not, whether they've ever heard of Yahweh God, Jehovah God, whatever you want to call him, Triune God, whether they've heard of him or not, doesn't matter. Those things encapsulated in those commandments are applicable to every single human being, from Adam and Eve to the last person that takes a breath in this universe. It doesn't matter where they live, doesn't matter what they're doing, that applies to them. Applies to people in India just as it applies to people in Mexico, and so on and so forth. And so these are requirements. Now, they're not requirements for salvation. They cannot be. They cannot be because we cannot keep them. But they are requirements. So we like to say in Lutheranism that the keeping the law or keeping the commandments is required, period. Not, we don't say it is required for salvation. Huge difference. Huge difference. The Romans, the Baptists, the Nazarenes, you name it, the Messianics, okay? For the most part, keeping the law is required for salvation. You don't keep the law in one way or another, either positively or negatively, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. And you could very easily lose your salvation, very easily. I mean, it's not just a maybe. It's pretty much a done deal. Lutheran theology, biblical theology, is the commandments are required, period. They're not suggestions, they're not ideas, they're not opinions, they're not theories. They are requirements from God. God requires us to do this, but not for our salvation. Okay? Just because he's God, and we're not. I saw another hand. Where did I see another hand? I thought I saw another hand. No? Okay. Anything else? Let's move on. We got something important to discuss. So as I told somebody, I am loaded for bear this morning, so keep up or get run over. All right? So, Proverbs 22:6. Find that. Look it up. It's on page 1033 in your Faith Partner Bibles, or whatever, as Jerry would say. A common verse most of us know quite well. Most of us have heard all of our lives. But I need to dispossess you of some very wrong thoughts concerning this verse. Somebody like to read that? Go ahead, Laura.
Train up the child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it.
All right. So, question. Is this a warning or is this a promise? Let's see hands. How many see this as a promise that if you if you take your child to church, take your child to Sunday school, take your child to parochial school if you have one, read the Bible every night with your kid, pray every night with your kid. If you do that, that is a promise from God. A promise from God that your child will not become a Wiccan priestess or whatever. How many hands? How many believe that? Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, good for you. How many think it's a warning? Oh, okay. All right, good. Why do you think that way? I don't know. Why do you think that way? Somebody. Yes, sir.
Because it's worded that way. Train up your child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
Uh-huh.
So just the way it's stated, it sounds like it's a warning.
Okay. Right. I get a lot of questions from parents over the years. Probably one of the most common questions I get. How come, Pastor, my kid went to confirmation class, my kid went to Sunday school, my kid went to church, my kid, whatever, and my kid's now a alcoholic druid, or whatever. How come? God promised me that if I did right and trained my child up the way he should go, that he would not depart from it, and he has departed from it. What gives? Okay, I get this question in various different forms and various different wordings all the time. All right? So it's misunderstood, obviously not by you. Obviously, you've been in Bible class long enough and you know better. When I tell you something, that's the opposite, whatever. Okay, a literal translation would go something like this. Initiate a child in the beginning of his way. This is not in the text. The verb go in Hebrew is not in the text, and no parameter of that verb, like should, optative is in there, okay? Initiate a child in the beginning of his way, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So the first clause of the sentence is where the mistake is, okay? The word initiate or dedicate, it has an interesting history, okay? It's from Hanok in Hebrew, and Hanok means to dedicate or train, and it comes from the Hebrew term for the practice of the midwives in the old days would take either a little bit of oil or sometimes a kind of a syrup that's made from dates. And they would put some on their finger and they would rub this on the palate of newborns. Okay? So in other words, after the birth, is taken care of. The umbilical cord is cut. The afterbirth is taken care of, and you've swaddled the baby up and ready to give it to its mother, or the mother itself is there by herself, like Mary in her case. But one of the things that they would always do is take some of this date syrup, and dates are very sweet, and so they would Arabs would make a syrup out of it, or people in that region, and then they would put some on their finger and rub it against the roof of their mouth. What would this do, ladies? Make them suck, yes. Babies usually, and 3 out of my 5 kids took to nursing right away without any problem. You put them at the teat and they just grab right on and went to town. 2 of them took a while. One of the 2, as a matter of fact, refused altogether, which was tough for my wife. But in any case, so there are children who don't just, for whatever reason, they don't just latch on. And so the Arabs and others in that region, of course, would do this so that they would be. So that's where the word comes from. And so the whole idea here is to begin something that's going to be very beneficial for the rest of your life. You see, eating is kind of beneficial, isn't it? You kind of have to do that, don't you? Otherwise, you're going to die. All right. So, to initiate something. So it also then is used in Hebrew for to make submissive, and it's the term that's often used to put a rope in the mouth of a donkey or a horse or something like that to train that animal, equine animal, to accept eventually what? The bit and the bridle, right, exactly. So rather than start off with the metal, or in their case in the old days, wooden bit, hard, okay, you would start with something soft, like a rope. And that's how you would train the various equines to do that, to prepare for bit and bridle. It was also finally used as the dedication of a house. And it's the word used for the dedication of the temple in a couple of instances, all right? So the whole idea is to begin something, to start something that is going to be beneficial for the rest of your life. And so you can see the word train is okay, initiate is maybe a little bit better, but you get the idea. The next term, the term that's translated go or should go, is really interesting. It has nothing to do with going. It has nothing to do with walking or running or proceeding or anything like that. It is the Hebrew word peh. 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 Peh is the Hebrew word for mouth. Now, initiate a child in the mouth. Well, with the history of initiate, we can understand why they would use peh there. Initiate a child in the mouth is literally what it says. But it also later began to mean an opening. It's a word used for the opening of a cave, the opening of canyons, the entrance of a canyon, the opening of a well, all right? Okay, so it got to mean, eventually, as time went on, it got to mean the beginning of something. And then even further along, it got to mean to command something. All right, and then eventually it began to mean a person's practice, a person's way. In other words, the lifestyle, the characteristics of his everyday living. All right, his way. And then that word came, when it was used in the Aramaic and then later in the Greek, became the word for Christianity, the way. Okay, so you see this derivative. You remember, Hebrew has very few, comparatively, vocables. It has a smaller, no vowels, of course, in its alphabet, so it has a smaller alphabet, and it has smaller vocables. And those vocables, or words, nouns and verbs, tend to mean a whole ton of stuff. A lot of times, it don't seem related, or related by a stretch. You've got to go a lot of steps before you see how that... And that's just what the primitive languages, and I don't mean primitive in the sense of simple or bad, I mean primitive in the sense of very, very old. Sanskrit's the same way. Sanskrit's the same way. Some other writing, really ancient Japanese, ancient Chinese, they have fewer words that mean a multiple of things. And so that's why this verse got messed up. The people doing the original translation, King James days and whatever, didn't catch the nuance. They didn't speak Hebrew. Some of them, they knew Hebrew or they studied Hebrew, but it was only very limited. It wasn't the culture of the Hebrew and the culture of the Semites. It was just whatever vocables were in the Bible. And they had a hard time sometimes translating. Okay, so the whole idea here is begin or start or initiate a child in his way. Okay, now it also means his way in that getting his way. Okay, so if you give your child his way, what does that mean? You're spoiling him, exactly. You give a child his way in the beginning, in the initiative process, he's going to insist on his way the rest of his life. And therefore, the rest of his life, he's going to be a pain in the patoot, right? He's going to be a problem. And at the very worst of it, he's going to be antisocial. The very worst of it, he's going to have no conscience. He's going to think only of himself, and that's it. A sociopath, in other words. Okay, and that's a typical diagnosis, if you will, of mass murderers. Is they are sociopaths. Okay, they have no conscience. They have no care. They don't have no feeling for anybody else except themselves. Okay, and it doesn't matter if they've had a good life or a bad life. If they've had a good life and they've been given everything, then they can say, well, I'm top dog, everybody's below me, and therefore I can kill them as I see fit. Or if they've had a really bad life, oh, poor pitiful me, everybody hates me, so I'm going to take it out on everybody. So either way, okay, whatever way a child is, and child by nature, of course, we know from the Bible, has original sin. So basically, if you give a young person their old Adam, let it go free rein, this is what's going to happen. Now, it's not a promise so much, therefore, as it is a warning. In other words, whatever you do, I mean, if you want to give a child his way, oh, poor kid, oh, absolutely, do, Daddy just wants to make you happy, then that's what you're going to get. in the end. He won't depart from that when he's older. If that's the way you raise him, don't be surprised. And so you can take him to church, you can take him to Sunday school, you can get him confirmed, you can do all kinds of things. But in the meantime, if you're giving him every piece of his heart's desire, all right, even if he maybe obeys himself, obeys in Sunday school or behaves himself in school or whatever, but you're giving him everything, you're not training him up right. And whatever he hears in God's word and whatever he hears in church or whatever is going to be counteracted by what he's given at home as to make him the center and the be-all and end-all of everything, you see. And so that's the way you're really training him. No matter where you take him or what you do with him, if that's the way you're training him most of the time, then he's not going to be any different. He's never going to be satisfied. He's never going to be content, and so on and so forth. So it is, exactly. Thank you very much. It is a warning. You all pass with flying colors. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Is that you do not have to teach a child anything bad. That's inherent. Everything that you teach a child to be good, that's work.
It is, yeah. You don't have to teach a child to steal, right? I mean, you put two little kids in two little preschool kids, whatever, 3 years old. You put them in a room and you put one toy in the room, right? And even you tell one of them, "Well, that's Tommy's." As soon as Tommy turns his back, Jimmy comes over and takes it, right? You don't have to teach him that, right? 9 times out of 10, it's usually the way it happens, right? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. You know, I've seen that with my kids. We had them in 2 batches. The first 3 were 2 years apart. The second 2 were 5 years apart. But the first 3 grew up together pretty much. Not even 2 years in most cases. But anyway, they were all close in age, and so they grew up together. And man, I tell you, you could have 3 ice cream sundaes, all exactly identical. I want that one. Why? Because it's sitting in front of him. That's why I want that one. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. So, another question. All right, Exodus chapter 2 we're on to now. Hallelujah. Look at that. We're making progress. I tried to construct this Bible class a little differently than I've done in the past so that we can move a little quicker and not get so draggy-outy, so to speak. Okay? So, first 5 verses of chapter 2 go like this. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi. Well, both of them from the tribe of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him no longer, she got him a wicker basket and covered it over with tar and pitch, and then she put the child into it and set it along the reeds by the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to find out what would happen. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the Nile with her maidens walking alongside the Nile. And she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid, and she brought it to her. Okay. Note that both of Moses' parents are from the tribe of Levi. Why is this important? They were priests, that's right, the family of priests. Now, not all priests, if and when you happen to attend the basics course this time around, we'll talk a lot, quite a bit, about the scribes, the priests, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and all that kind of stuff in our introduction to the time of Christ. And you will find out that the priests, some of them were very, very wealthy, and most of them were very, very poor. Most of them had to subsist with second and third jobs, or be farmers back in their priestly town, their Levite town in wherever they came from. So being a priest was not exactly top dog profession, but it was important for this reason that Moses is going to serve as a priest, even though Aaron, of course, is made the actual first high priest. But before Aaron is made priest, Moses fulfills all 3 offices. He fills, like Christ, he fills a prophet, priest, and king. right? So that's important that Moses, as a type of Christ, is from the priestly family. Again, you will hear in the New Testament times and in the intertestamental times, it was very, very important for priests to keep their line pure. Priests could only marry into children from other priests. In other words, men priests, because women weren't priests, but men priests could only marry daughters from priestly families. That is, both the man and the woman had to be Levites all the way to the time of Christ, really to the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. Moses is at least the third child born to Amram and Jochebed, his sister having been born 14 years earlier, and his brother Aaron 3 years before Moses. Since Aaron was not in danger when he was born, Pharaoh's latest murderous edict must have been pronounced between the births of the two boys. What does this tell you? This tells you something. So Aaron is born, and then sometime after that, so that it doesn't apply to Aaron, Jochebed becomes pregnant again. What does that tell you? They were not afraid of the edict. In other words, they did not practice birth control, or sex control, I guess you could put it, out of fear that they would have a child, and that child be a male, and that male then would be killed by Pharaoh. They trusted the Lord. Okay? Sometimes this is not mentioned, but I think we do them injustice. Just as we do Abram and Sarah injustice, when we really don't think about what it took, what it had to take in order for the 100-year-old Abram and Sarah to obey God's promise or trust in God's promise and have sex at their age. Granted that they were going to live at 100 to 150 or whatever, Sarah not quite that long, so they probably were in a better shape than most 100-year-old in our day today. But still, we have to take that into account. When Paul talks about Abram, he really concentrates on this point. He says, they trusted God, and so did what they had to do. And it may have been difficult, it may have been unpleasant, whatever, but they did it. The word translated in many versions as beautiful is actually nothing more than the Hebrew word for good. Here again, I don't know why the translators chose to use the words they do. I don't know. I think sometimes they just they wanted to kind of embellish things a little bit or make them nice or poetic. King James translators are quite guilty of this very often. In Shakespearean days, of course, Elizabethan language, they like to kind of flourish the wording as best they could. So healthy, strong is the idea. So it wasn't that he looked good necessarily, looked beautiful in that sense, but he was a really good specimen of a male baby. Put it that way, okay? So Moses' mother would have allowed Moses to be drowned, if he were weak and sickly, right? No, that's not the point of the passage. The point of the passage is that it was just, this is a side comment saying, this kid is destined for good stuff. Huh? The writer is simply stating that it would have been extra wasteful and tragic to destroy such a fine infant. The basket was really a box or chest made up of the buoyant papyrus reeds, which were plentiful in Goshen. Moses uses the same word to describe Noah's Ark back in Genesis. Also, the tar, pitch, is the same, perhaps even imported from Mesopotamia via Palestine. We don't know that there was a lot of oil or oil products in Nile. Now, we know there's oil out here in Libya. We know that. But whether the Egyptians made use of that or whether they made use of the pitch and tar that was very prevalent in Mesopotamia, in the area around Baghdad and whatever, that is a questionable point. The word for reed here is the Egyptian word for flags, meaning that these were very bushy plants common in marshy areas along the banks of the Nile. So, questions. What is significant? Well, we already talked about that, okay. How do you hide a squalling baby for even 3 months? Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that what she did? She gave it to one of his servants?
Yeah, and wet nurses were pretty common among the Jews, just as they were pretty common among all cultures in that day. Wet nurses was quite an occupation. I mean, it was a very common occupation. As a matter of fact, it was a very common occupation in this country up until the last century, I guess you could say. Okay, up until the First World War, or maybe a little before that, in the South, wet nurses were still very common in the 1920s, 1930s. Southern women, even after the war between the states, or the late unpleasantness, as Grandpa used to say, even after that time, even after the time of Gone with the Wind, wet nurses were extremely common in the South. Southern women did not like to have to be tied to a nursing child. I think after the Second World War, they would have been also very popular, or more popular even, because people like my mother's generation, did not like nursing at all. And as a matter of fact, refused to do it. And in her day, as you might know, some of you might know, they would, the doctors would prescribe medicine to dry up your milk. And this is what they wanted. It was considered a gauche for you to be nursing your child. My mother was horrified, and I do mean horrified, when my wife began nursing my children. She was horrified. She said, "Oh, we would never do that in our day. What's the matter with you? Aren't you modern? Where's your bottle? What's going on?" And my wife would say, "I refuse to have bottle babies." And man, I tell you, they were thick as thieves up to that moment. And after that, they hardly ever spoke. It's just two completely different ways of thinking. So wet nurse is very, very common. That's a possibility. What's another possibility? Yeah. No. How do you keep the kid for? How do you hide a baby for 3 months?
If you let a wet nurse, you can have another baby, and it could be a female. Yeah.
Well, that's true too. Go ahead, Joe. Yeah. Sure. I had a nanny, black nanny, when I was growing up, not as a nurse, but she was my second mommy. Yeah, and we had two maids at the big house in Whittier. And they're both named Jenny. And so one was Jenny, and the other one was Old Black Jenny. That was her name. As long as I could remember, that was her name, Old Black Jenny. And she was a hoot. She looked almost identical to the lady on the old Aunt Jemima boxes. Looked just like her. Looked just like that one in Gone with the Wind. I swear they could be sisters. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time with Jenny. Went to church with her a few times. The Rose of Sharon of the Apostolic Succession. Woo! And man, I tell you, Reverend Ebenezer, he could go on. He could preach for an hour. And he must have been 90 years old at the time. Easy. Why couldn't he have been hidden for much longer than 3 months? Yes. Okay. All right. Is there another reason? Yes. Okay, that's possible. What else? Anybody? Why all of a sudden 3 months? And then, yes.
You might have started rolling over and doing a few more activities.
Okay.
Made it harder because when they're
Swaddled. Yeah.
they're easy to
Yeah.
I mean, they they're not going to be moving around so much. But once they get 3 months, they're going to start exploring. I mean, they're not going to be quite there to crawl yet. They're certainly going to be rolling over and doing a few other
Right.
activities.
Yeah. Possible. I think that perhaps Pharaoh's soldiers, instead of just waiting for the Jews to come into town and get supplies or whatever, instead of just taking a chance that you're going to spot a Hebrew boy baby. I think Pharaoh soldiers are now coming into Goshen and going door to door and looking. That's what I think. I think that makes perfect sense. You're going to hope that you're going to pick out a lot of these Jewish babies by this time. But if the numbers just weren't coming in, as Pharaoh would get the reports, well, we drowned, 200 male babies this week, and you go, 200, that's it? Out of 5 million people? How many babies are there going to be? More than 200, that's for sure. What's going on here? Let's expedite this a little bit. That's my thought. Why would a royal princess, a female pharaoh, if this is Hatshepsut, be bathing out in the open on the edge of a great river? Yes, sir.
It's protected by the soldiers.
That's possible. That's possible. Could be the high walls that stuck out into the river.
Those high reeds in the rivers.
Could be, yes. Could be, yes. Right? What else, dear? No indoor plumbing, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, the Nile was considered royal and holy and all that. Yeah, it was a god unto itself. Okay.
Quite often they used to go visit relatives and kind of get away for a while and have their babies and.
Oh, that's true. Yes, they had many palaces. Sometimes palaces in the south, palaces in the north, palaces in the up in the mesa area. You would say kind of dry heat kind of thing if they wanted that, and palaces down by the river. True. Archaeology has shown us that there's no finding of any kind of special enclosures. Now, of course, being along the Nile, of course, and the Nile flooding every year. A lot of this stuff could have been washed away. But we've seen no pictures or depictions of any kind of special enclosures being used, at least not ones with high walls. It could be that you had enclosures to keep the alligators out, with a net or some kind of grate in the water, fence in the water. That's possible. You didn't have to worry about piranhas; those are in the Amazon. But to keep alligators and crocodiles or whatever out, yeah, that's possible. Hippos too. Hippos are very dangerous, maybe more dangerous in some cases than alligators. That's possible, but we don't see any really royal enclosures that would break them off from everybody. The fact of the matter is, folks, that going around topless was not a big deal. As a matter of fact, nudity in general was just not a big deal for most ancient cultures. Nudity was not a really big deal until you get to America. Modern cultures in America, yeah. It's just not. And so our view of Elizabeth Taylor, maybe she's Hatshepsut, okay? Our view of Elizabeth Taylor, out standing in the Nile in her buff, being able to be viewed by people along the banks on either side, that may bother us. We may say, oh, that's terrible. But the Egyptians would go, who cares, right? It's like if you go over to Europe, right? There are a lot of places in Europe where you take your bathing suit off, and people go, who cares? It's a really American thing. It really is. It really is an American thing. And so that's not unusual, even for a princess. Okay. Since the ark was in a dense thicket, that's what I like to use the translation ark here. How did she see it to have it brought to her? What do you think? Yeah, I'm sure she liked to go exploring, maybe a little bit, and I'm sure that she might see too if the ark is. The baby is yay big and the ark is maybe a little bit bigger. It's going to push the reeds, aside. So she's going to go, what's over there, I wonder. That's interesting. But again, with crocodiles around, I don't know that I would do too much exploring. So I would be careful about that. Questions, 1 to 5, verses 1 to 5. Questions. Other questions besides what I thought of? Yes, ma'am.
Just a comment that all of these questions that you have there are basically resolve God's plan. Sure.
Yeah. Of course. And that's true of everything. I mean, That's true of everything. But at the same time, it's good of us to always consider how God carries out his plan. You could do this a whole ton of different ways. He could deliver Moses on a cloud down to the
Ways that
people.
we are
Oh,
familiar.
right. He likes to use instrumentality very often. Okay. So next verses 6 to 10. When she, that is Hatshepsut, opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the boy was crying. And she had pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Please note that. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, this is Moses' sister. Okay? So his sister Miriam said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" So Hebrew milk is different than Egyptian milk. Okay? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go ahead." So the girl went and called the child's mother. When Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." Again, typical job, nothing spectacular here, normal function. So the woman took the child and nursed him. So Jochebed gets her boy back, takes him, and nurses him. The child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, that is Pharaoh's son, or the daughter's son. And she named him Moses and said, "Because I drew him out of the water." Okay, all kinds of interesting stuff here. First of all, the infant Moses is guided by the unseen hand of God to the place best suited for his needed training as a leader of great people, the royal house of Egypt. As Laura just mentioned, this fits perfectly with what we know of the rest of the story. Okay? We know Moses is going to have to be, he's going to have to be a person that knows law to judge the people, right and wrong for the people. He's going to have to know geography. He's going to have to know where he's going. He's going to have to know well digging. He's going to have to know metallurgy. He's going to have to know guiding or traveling by the stars. He's going to have to know a lot of stuff. If you're going to lead a nation of 5 million people through an abject wilderness, even if it's only going to be for a couple years, he didn't know yet it was going to be 40 years. But if you're going to do that, you better have a lot of training. You better have a PhD, buddy, okay, in a lot of different areas, all right, in physics and geometry, and everything else. And so we know from Josephus and other ancient writers that the education in the house of Pharaoh was top notch. It was the Harvard of the day. It was the Cambridge, it was the Yale, it was the Oxford of the ancient world. The name Moses is very Egyptian and is found frequently in Egyptian writings, usually in the form of Mezu. Its most basic meaning is to draw or produce, and can also mean born, child, brought forth, or draw forth. Sometimes you'll hear Bible critics say, "Where does this word come from? This is unheard of. Nobody knows what this word means." That's baloney. It's an incredibly common word in Egyptian, both in hieroglyphics and in the other written language in Egypt. For people to say that, they're just ignorant. They're completely ignorant. Now, it is not a Hebrew term. That is true. Not a Hebrew term. It became a Hebrew term, but it was originally an Egyptian word. The question is often asked, did Moses have a Hebrew name? If he did, we don't know what it was. God has not decided to let us know that for whatever reason, which is really interesting because, of course, the child would have been named at a circumcision. That's what you do at a circumcision. One of the things that you do at a circumcision is you name the child, okay, at 8 days. There is some question, of course, as to whether or not the Jews in Goshen were even practicing circumcision. Some say yes, some say no. We know they didn't practice circumcision in their journey in the wilderness because they all had to be circumcised when they crossed the River Jordan before the Battle of Jericho. The whole nation, all the men anyway. So we know that. But whether or not this had been lapsed, not just for those 40 years, but whether it had been lapsed for 400 years, I don't know. It's a very distinct possibility, but maybe not. Tracy, you had your hand up first. No? Okay. Go ahead, Laura.
Would it have been too noticeable by the Egyptians, did they, all of them know that he was Hebrew?
That's my first question here, yeah.
Would they have noticed if he had been circumcised?
That's certainly right. That's certainly one way to tell. Now, as I mentioned when we talked about this in another class, circumcision is not unique to Jews. It was practiced by other cultures already at this time in world history. And it was practiced in Egypt to a certain extent. It was practiced also in various other of the empires that Egypt had to deal with. And so Egyptians would have come across circumcised males before this, okay? So we're not sure that that's really the tell point here. The question is, how did the princess recognize the infant as the Hebrew child? What does Cecil B. DeMille and Josephus say? The blanket, yes. The blanket, of course, in the movie, the blanket is the giveaway, okay? Did the tribes have their tribal colors already at this time? We don't know. It is possible. Nothing is mentioned either in history or in the Bible about tribal standards until you get to the actual Exodus. How were those tribal standards arrived at, and what were they made out of? Were they made out of wood or stone, or were they weaved into some kind of pattern in cloth? We don't know. Were they flags? We don't know. We have no idea. And so Josephus, of course, he is a Jew, and he has access to records that we no longer possess, we no longer have access to. And so perhaps he has information that we don't know about that would tell us this. On the other hand, you have to know that Josephus a lot of times just went with his gut on this stuff. And he would say things just that made sense to him and that fit Jewish culture, whether or not he had anybody he could quote as a source or not. Okay, you have to know that. So I don't know. Was their skin maybe a little bit darker or a little bit lighter? This could be. If the Egyptians are a mix of Southern Egyptian or Upper Egyptian and Lower Egyptian, they're probably a little darker skinned, as the hieroglyphics tell us. We can see the skin tone of the various pharaohs and other people changes over time. Sometimes it's light, sometimes it's dark, depending on who's in. The Hittites were rather light-skinned. So the light-skinned pharaohs were probably the new, not the new people, but the people that were around in Joseph's day. The darker-skinned pharaohs were the new pharaohs, the new house that came in after they threw the Hittites out, or the Hyksos out. Okay, the Hyksos we think were combination Hittites and Phoenicians. So that could be it. Could be that the color of the skin was either lighter or darker, whichever, and looked Hebrew. Okay, that's a possibility. So you've got a number of possibilities. You've got some kind of symbol or some kind of something with the child to designate that. You've got circumcision, which is possible way to tell, and you've got the skin color. Eye color, hair color too, same thing. I mean, they might just look more Hebrew. In the end, probably it doesn't matter because you've got this little Hebrew girl, who's obviously a Hebrew girl, you know, and running up and saying, "Hey, I can get you a Hebrew midwife." Now, why would she say that, or a Hebrew nurse? Why would she say that unless she was a Hebrew? See? So it becomes kind of a moot point. That's it. Why wouldn't an Egyptian nursemaid be used for the son of the princess? Perhaps. Yes.
Because the daughter of Moses' mother suggested a Hebrew.
Yeah, maybe the queen said, well, instead of me, you know, trying to find one, and probably there were probably a bunch in the palace. As you may know, the palace or the royal house of Pharaoh had lots and lots of women in it, and I'm sure more than one of them were pregnant at any given time. If this is the Pharaoh we think it is, he had numerous wives. and numerous sons and daughters and so on and so forth, of which some of them were married and had children. Yes, ma'am.
The edict announced the Hebrew boys had to die.
Yes.
And a Hebrew nursemaid would be much less likely to tell someone
Yes.
that this was a Hebrew child and should actually be thrown in the river or not.
Exactly. And there was the danger, even though she is Hatshepsut, we think, and even though she is pretty powerful, okay, there is the chance that she takes this Hebrew child, which obviously is noticeably Hebrew in some way, okay, into the palace, and her daddy comes walking along saying, hey, where'd you get that Hebrew baby? Okay, or that baby looks Hebrew, and cause all kinds of consternation. So maybe it's a little safer, a little easier, until weaning time, which is either 2 or 3 years, depending on the situation. But maybe let the edict kind of die down a little bit. Let daddy get off his vent, whatever, and put the kid away safe so that she can grab him later. Okay, which of course then brings up a whole lot of other problems, but we're not going to get into those right now. Did the princess know the nurse was the child's actual mother? Would this have mattered? 2 questions, really.
I think she probably knew, but I don't think she cared.
Okay. Would it have mattered? I don't think so. Wouldn't have mattered at all.
Edict was against
Again, you have Josephus and Cecil B. DeMille having them meet and become friends and all this and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that happened. I kind of doubt that the princess of Egypt would go into the land of Goshen and seek out Jochebed. I don't see that happening, but again, Josephus, he likes stories, and so does Cecil. He like a good story, so you got to make up some of this stuff. How could Moses' mother give up her son after he was weaned? So she spends, again, 2 to 3 years. That's the time period that goes between those verses, folks. This is normal in the Middle East among the Jews and Israelis, also among the Egyptians and pretty much everybody else. This was pretty much the thing. I mean, children today, of course, mothers get 6-month maternity leave or so, maybe a little bit more, and then of course have to take their breast pumps to the break room, wherever they're working, and work out that whole deal. And some do and some don't. Some just give it the 6 months and then stop. Some keep going. My dear daughter-in-law, okay, she breastfed her kids till they were 4 or 5. Okay, that was her thing. That's what she did. So weaning usually took place around the time of 2 or 3 birthday, second or third birthday. Third, a little more common than earlier. So figure that Jochebed is having to, or is getting to have her son with her every day for 3 full years, and then give him up to Pharaoh. Some have compared this to Hannah. Everybody knows Hannah, okay? Giving up Samuel after a certain period of time to the temple. Okay, yeah, maybe Jochebed understood. Maybe she saw, hey, God can use this. This would be good to have one of our Hebrews educated and raised in the house of Pharaoh. And so, yeah, sure, I'll do this. Did she have visiting privileges? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I kind of doubt it. I kind of doubt a Hebrew would be easily welcome to come traipsing into the palace any old time. Hey, I come here to see my son. The other question, of course, comes in is, here is Hatshepsut, and all of a sudden this 3-year-old infant shows up, this toddler shows up. You got to imagine her brothers or sisters, her father, still alive, and her mother and others are saying, hey, where'd this kid come from? This isn't addressed, not even by Josephus. The picture that we have is that this kid is just accepted as her child immediately, and given, again, all of the perks and all the advantages and all the privileges of a true future king, perhaps, of Egypt. And even though the firstborn is always going to be the king in waiting, the Prince of Wales, so to speak, it happened so often in those days, of course, and throughout really history, even into modern times. It happened very often that the firstborn, a son, would be killed or die of some reason, or be indisposed of some reason, or like George abdicate for Wallace Simpson, the American divorcee. And so this is why Diana, when she was princess, it was always said her one and only duty was to have an heir and a spare. Okay, so Willie and then Andrew, heir and a spare. Every queen needed to produce 2 baby boys, not just one, 2 baby boys. This was the problem with Henry VIII. He only produced 1, and Edward died at 16. But again, there's God's involved in that too. So, what meaning, besides the obvious mentioned by the princess, could Moses' name represent? So Moses, to draw out, as I said here, to be born, to bring forth, to produce. Anything? Well, the water is going to play a huge role, isn't it, in the life of Moses? Water is going to be a big thing. One of the curses, of course, that Moses does is the water of the Nile. That's a big curse. Of course, he crosses the Red Sea, right? Big deal. Water from the rock, not just once, but twice, all right? Crossing the Jordan, even though he doesn't cross the Jordan, but the people have to cross the Jordan. So water is a big deal in Moses' life. He meets his future wife at the well in Moab, or not Moab, Media. So I can see that God would say, you know what? Let's just let this name be his name. We're not gonna. If he had a Hebrew name, we don't care, right? And so we're just going to let this be his name, and it has to do with water coming out of the water, and so this will be good. This will be a good name for him. Okay. Further questions? All right. Next few verses, 11 to 15. Now it came about in those days when Moses had grown up that he went out to his brethren and looked on their hard labors. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that. When he saw there was no one around, he struck down the Egyptian, meaning he killed him, and hid him in the sand. He went out the next day, and behold, 2 Hebrews were fighting each other. And he said to the offender, in other words, the one who was in the wrong, the attacker, why are you striking your companion? He said, who made you a prince or a judge over us? Are you intending to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Ooh, news travels fast, doesn't it? Then Moses was afraid and said, surely the matter has become known. All right, so a couple of points here. At midlife, after 38 years of living, this is again from history, Josephus mostly, learning and ruling in the house of Pharaoh, Moses goes out. That is, he leaves the palace life to go back and live among his own people and sees and experiences for himself firsthand what their lives were like. Now again, Cecil B. Makes it very dramatic. Charlton Heston discovers all of a sudden that he's Hebrew, and then, oh, this is a bad thing. I'm gonna go and dig in the mud pits with my brother, whatever. I don't know if it was that. I think he always knew. He always knew he was Hebrew. Okay, and everybody else did too. This was not a big secret. He wasn't the first in line to the throne anyway, ever. It's not like there was a competition between him and Ramses. Ramses wouldn't be born for another 200 years, folks. But anyway, it wasn't a competition between him and the Prince of Wales. All right, there was no competition. Moses would only be picked if everybody else was dead. Okay, so it's not likely that Moses is going to rise to the seat of Pharaoh. Okay, let's get that out of our heads right away. Everybody knows who this guy is, and at this point, nobody cares. Okay, the queen loves him. Queen calls him son. Psst, good enough for us. All right. So, but he, I think it's more like this. Rather than being shocked and appalled that this was kept from him and all that, I think he's learned everything he can learn. According to historians, this guy, Josephus, not him alone, but others, this guy goes out, Philo and others, this guy goes out and leads armies. He wins great battles. He builds monuments. He does all the things that old Chuck Heston was said to do. Okay, that much we know is true. Okay, so he was a great, big guy. He was a very famous guy. He was a very achieved person. He achieved a great deal. And I think more likely it says, look, I've learned all that I can learn in the house of Pharaoh, at the University of Pharaoh. I've learned all I can learn by leading armies and being a general. I've learned all that I can learn about traipsing down in Sudan and going to Ethiopia and over to Libya and visiting the Hittites maybe and who knows else. Okay, I've done all that. One thing I don't know anything about, I don't know anything about my own people. So I think I'm just going to go and, hang with them for a while. I'm going to hang with them and see what their life is like and get to know them. They're my people, and so I want to get to know them. I want to understand. If someday I have to rule over these people, I need to know what they're all about. Okay, so I think that's probably a more likely scenario. That Moses just decides, hey, I want to know my own people, and so I'm going to go and live among them for a while. At this point in his life, Moses is somewhat rash, impetuous, and passionate man, used to getting his own way, big surprise, and acting without fear of consequences. Well, hey, he's a prince of Egypt. As a prince of Egypt, he does whatever he wants to do, and nobody's going to say no to him. Not even his father, a lot of times. Most of the pharaohs, and the same with kings throughout history, have kind of a hands-off approach to raising their kids. Somebody else do that. Okay? Until they get fully grown up, and then maybe they'll go fishing with them, or whatever. But for the most part, not much. When he sees what he feels a great injustice, he acts swiftly, rashly, and with finality. I'm sure as a prince of Egypt, I'm sure that if he saw what he thought was injustice in the palace, or in his army, or in a building project, or whatever, he probably dealt with it the same way. He probably ordered the guy executed if it was something severe enough. And so this was his way. He would act first, think later. Shoot now and ask questions later. Or shoot them all and let God decide, that kind of thing. I think this was Moses' personality at this point. And being raised as a prince of Egypt, it makes perfect sense that this is the way he is. But in his new position in life, he has no right to impose his will, much less capital punishment on the taskmaster. Even his Hebrew brethren understand this and mock his attempted usurpation of authority as a leader and judge among them. Okay? So yeah, you might be a prince of Egypt, but hey, this ain't Egypt, buddy. This is Goshen. We take care of our own matters here. We have our own rules. And remember, the Egyptians and the Jews did not have a whole lot of interaction. Okay? So as far as we know, the Jews kind of governed themselves. With no support from either Egyptians or Hebrews, he has no choice but to leave the country and go into exile. I guess we didn't read those passages, but we'll read them next time. Moses didn't just wander around until he ended up in Midian. He purposely chose the land of Midian as his new home and actually settled there as if to live out the rest of his life there in semi-seclusion. Moses does not know what he is supposed to do yet. He does not know his destiny. His idea at this point, the text is very clear, his idea at this point is to live and die in Midian as a Midianite. That's it. And pretty much live and die in obscurity. He's happy with that. The place where he set up his new home is well known by Arabs to this day as the Well of Jethro. You can go find it, and it is, as I mentioned before, in this part of Saudi Arabia. We'll stop there. We'll talk a lot about Midian next time. Everything and anything you ever wanted to know about Midian, whether you want to do it or not. Yeah. Yeah. Questions, comments? All right, let's close. May the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us all. Amen.